7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, and welcome to the Marketing Essentials podcast. Our unique team helps small businesses grow by providing essential marketing expertise. Hi, and welcome to the Marketing Essentials podcast. Today we're talking about webinars. Do you need one? Well, we'll find out. I'm Justin Kerr with Justin Kerr Design.
I'm W.Parmentier with W.Parmentier Photography.
And I'm Alicia Piazza with Custom Marketing Solutions.
And together we make up
The Marketing Essentials team.
See, we get better every time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like a fine wine, right?
So we're talking about webinars today, and we started out as the Marketing Essentials team doing a webinar. Mm-hmm. And after we were finished, we realized that there was just so much more to talk about in regards to marketing. And then we started the podcast. But webinars are really good way of marketing yourself. They're a really good way of building your expertise and sharing that expertise with an audience. But we're going to talk a little bit about today is, okay, well, how do you, if you decide, I want to do a webinar, I've got some good content that I want to get out there, but how do I put one together? Where do I start?
Yeah, and full disclosure, when we first started out, we're like, how hard could that be?
And we quickly found out how hard it could be.
Webinars, podcasts, they're all not as simple as just getting an idea together and speaking about it.
Right.
It takes a little bit of planning. Mm-hmm. And if you're not planning it out ahead of time, you're what's the saying?
If you
a failure
don't
to plan is a plan
for failure. Yeah,
thank you.
And I think like any marketing initiative, which a webinar is a marketing initiative, the first thing you need to know is who's your audience. Mm-hmm. And I mean, full disclosure, when we did the webinar, we weren't quite sure.
Yeah, we didn't quite have it nailed down.
Who our audience was. It was almost more like, well, anybody who needs marketing. It's like, that's a little too broad.
And I think, we're a new business, so we're kind of refining as we go.
Yeah. Sure.
But at least we realize. And so that's a big point. We're going to talk about what we learned and how you can do it differently when you start out.
So the first part about that is you need to nail down your topic. What do you want to talk about? What's the goal of whatever webinar you're going to be doing? Mm-hmm. And I've heard webinars on everything, how to increase sales to how to market your business. So there's no one-size-fits-all webinar, so to speak.
No.
So the reality is you really need to take some time and sit down, and especially in the case of us, where there were three of us putting this together, we needed to collaborate to figure out how to get it all to fit together properly.
Right.
So that's the first thing we have to go through, talk about.
But if you do, like going back to Justin's point, if you do know who your audience is, really dig into that persona, and your webinar should focus around like a topic of, what solution can you provide to them? What is their pain point, and how can your webinar add insane value to what they're trying to accomplish?
You need how you're going to reach them.
Mm-hmm. So in our case, Marketing Essentials team, we're aiming ourselves at small to medium-sized businesses, specifically the owners or the marketing directors of those businesses who may need a little extra help with their marketing, or maybe the owners have decided, hey, I'm going to do my own marketing, but I don't know where to begin. Sure. So the reason we exist is to provide tips, tricks, expertise, good information, so that if you do want to do it yourself, you can. Mm-hmm. So that, like Alicia said, has kind of come over time. We've been able to kind of suss that out and say, okay, this is what we're about. So now we're able to think about, okay, if we're creating content, each podcast we do has a specific topic. Mm-hmm. And as long as we know who we're marketing to, then we can, sort of tailor that content to say, hey, we're speaking to you, small business owner, or entrepreneur, or marketing director. We're here to give you this information. So it helps, I think, in, number one, knowing who your audience is. Once you know that, then you can craft your content, like you said, getting your content down. Now, length of webinar.
That's another big thing you have to think about, and I'm glad you actually brought that up because it's not in the notes. But that's a big consideration. How much time do you want to take away from whoever's listening? Because obviously everybody's time is money. And especially in our case where we're aiming towards small business owners, they've got a lot on their plate.
Right.
So a half an hour tops is about where you want to go on a webinar. You don't want to be doing a 3-hour seminar, webinar,
And that's
Yeah,
another reason, sorry, Justin, why you want to make sure it has insane value, because it could be
Yeah.
a 5-minute webinar, but if you don't have something to offer that's going to stand out and be valuable,
They're tuning out.
right. So I think you could go longer, but overall you want to make sure that, your audience is going to get something from it.
Quality over quantity.
Definitely. Most of the webinars that I've participated in, business webinars, happen over lunch, between 12 and 1. And they run anywhere from 30 minutes to about just a little over 45, because you figure someone's taking a lunch break.
Yeah.
They got their lunch at their desk, they're going to listen to the webinar, and they can
Right.
squeeze it into the day. Now, I've also been part of webinars that have happened after hours. So 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. Again, you're in a time slot where, okay, you've come home, you've had dinner, and now you've got an hour that you can devote to, listening to a webinar. But if you're thinking of putting it on at 11 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon,
It's going to be a lot harder.
it's going to be really difficult, because you're asking a lot of people's schedules.
Now, I will give a caveat to that. In a case of a business putting on a webinar for maybe their own employees, because at that point now you've got a captive audience you can
Well, yeah.
say. Because I've been part of, with previous companies I've worked for, I've been part of webinars that were blasted out to the whole company, and everybody was encouraged to listen in during that time frame. So it may have been at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, but that was with the caveat of the company was putting it on, so.
Right, yeah, no, that's a good point, though. If it's an internal webinar,
Yeah.
I think you can be more flexible. If you're putting it out there for the general public, you've got to
Yeah.
be a little bit more strategic about.
I think we're talking about webinars more as like a marketing tool.
True.
Yeah.
True.
For your business.
So now you've nailed down your topic. Let's go to the next step. You've nailed down your topic. Before you actually go and put on the webinar, what's the next step?
Well, I mean, there's.
Silence. No.
Silence. Wow, it's like I asked a hard question.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of steps, but I guess the next one is once you have your content. As far as your content, having it written down is one thing, but you need to put it into a format that you can present it during the webinar. So I think the most typical one is a PowerPoint deck or a keynote deck.
Sure.
To present your information. In regards to that, one of the things I think you need to keep in mind when you're putting your content into a deck is that you're going to be speaking during this webinar, and you want people to listen to what you're saying. So don't just take your notes and dump them into a deck and then read through your deck. That is deadly.
You think?
I would have tuned out after 2 minutes
Yeah.
if I even made it that
Matter of
far.
fact, so in essence, less is more as far as what you're putting on the actual slides.
Yeah, the visuals should serve a couple of purposes. One, they should serve to reinforce what you're saying, not to mirror what you're saying by having bullet points there, but to reinforce it. So let's say you're talking about African safaris. You're marketing African safaris. Well, you're going to be talking about, why going on a safari is going to be a great thing, a great adventure. So you should be showing pictures of what a safari looks like.
Sure.
No one wants to sit there and read the bullet points along with you. That's just,
Like you said, that's the kiss of death,
right, they'll
basically.
tune right out. So the more senses that you can engage during a webinar, so if you have some good visuals that reinforce what you're saying, and they're listening to you, you're already engaging 2 senses, right? So that's optimal, so less is more in regards to the deck. Have some good visuals, and you don't have to create these from scratch. There's tons and tons of free templates out there that you can use for both PowerPoint and Keynote. Find one that's appropriate and put your information in it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel,
So what do you say to people as far as when they start throwing like text-heavy slides into a
Just
deck?
don't.
Even if they're not reading it verbatim, they may be
Just
throwing a ton
don't.
of text.
On a typical slide, if you have more than 5 or 6 elements, whether it's 5 or 6 bullet points or 5 or 6 pictures or whatever it is, you've hit that tipping point. If you have more than that, it's hard for someone to take in all at once. So again, less is more. 5 to 6 elements per slide. And if you are putting text up there, keep it short. use shorthand if necessary. I mean, you can use bullet points to reinforce what you're saying, but don't do it verbatim. Try to condense it into 1 or 2 words. That way, when someone is listening to you, they can just sort of glance at the slide and it reinforces what you're saying.
Sure.
But I've seen too many webinars where it's just the presenter's notes in slide form, and it's a snooze fest.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good the content is. So, you're presenting a multimedia presentation. You're speaking, you're showing things. Make the most out of both those formats.
Right.
So now you've got, in a scenario here, you've got your topic. You've decided on your topic. You've talked that out. You've gotten your deck together. What's the next step from there? What do we? Sorry. Did she get something?
I don't want to just gloss over the visual topic without talking about branding your webinar and how to make it, I know you could go into major detail on how to make it professional, but basically if you don't have, so Justin helped us out with ours because he's a graphic artist, and all our slides were really kind of clean and they all had a similar look, especially if you have multiple people contributing. You want the visuals to be that brand look to be consistent throughout, and if you just suck at visuals, then just hire someone to do it. Don't be Googling images and just plopping them on a white PowerPoint with your logo in the corner.
Right.
That's what I would do. That's why I would hire Justin.
Speaking of images, we've brought this up before in some of our other podcasts. If you are grabbing images off Google, be very careful because you may be including an image in your presentation that is protected by copyright.
Yeah, that's one of my huge pet peeves.
Right. Now, if you're charging for that webinar, you've now violated that copyright. Okay, you're using somebody else's intellectual property.
It happens more than you would think.
Right.
I was on just a quick side note, I was on a Facebook page, a business Facebook page the other day, and somebody put up a photo, and it still had the watermark from Shutterstock on it.
Yeah.
I was just like...
Yeah, and that just looks unprofessional. Not only are you stealing that image because you didn't pay for it, but it just looks bad.
Yeah, it makes you look bad.
It's like buying a shirt and the tag is still hanging off of it.
Yeah, the security tag still hanging.
The security tag, yeah. Did you steal that shirt? No.
All right. But you're putting this webinar together as a marketing tool, and you're trying to give information away, but at the same time, you're representing your company and your brand. So I guess pay attention to those details, the visual details, and a level of professional visuals.
It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's be clear. There's a difference between perfection and being polished. It can be polished enough to where it has your branding, but it doesn't have to be perfect. People are forgiving to that.
And there's lots of resources out there for either very inexpensive or free stock photography. There's no reason to be lifting stuff off somebody else's website or off Google.
Matter of fact, I'll throw a few of those into the show notes so that people that are looking for stock.
But I think some people just lack, when you're so into the webinar, you may lack the idea of what to use as a visual. But if you work with someone who's a professional, if you were to bring on a graphic designer to help with this, they might have some outside of the box ideas, a different perspective.
Yeah.
We're not all creative people, and that's okay.
If you want a little inspiration, just go watch any of the Apple keynotes over the last 10 years, and you'll get schooled really fast on how to present and how to market your webinar, because the way that they use images and the way that they use the spoken part of the presentation, it's a master class.
Another great place for that is the TED Talks.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
TED Talks, I love watching the TED Talks, especially if you want to get an idea of how to present. One of the best ones I saw had a Seth Godin. He did, I believe it was a TED Talk that I saw him do once. It was all photos, not a single piece of text on the entire
But he's a huge advocate of using PowerPoint the way it should be used. Yeah. So he's a great one to use.
And he must have flipped through 100 slides in the course of 3 minutes.
Right.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll put that in the notes too.
He was I'll see if I can find that.
And I've even seen a couple of TED Talks specifically on how to put a PowerPoint deck together. So there's lots of resources out there.
And we'll throw a bunch of those in the notes. I'm thinking this is probably going to be a 2-part podcast, because I'm just realizing as we're getting through the notes, there's a lot of stuff we haven't even really hit upon. So let's go let's talk about the promotional end of it.
Yeah, so I feel like you could almost do a whole podcast on promoting because
Sure, and which
a
we
lot of people
probably
think,
will.
we always feel like we have tangents going on here, but with the promotion, you want to make sure that people are going to show up to your webinar. And so going back to your persona, your avatar, who is your audience basically, and where do they hang out? What social media channels are they on? Where can you post this webinar so that you're getting in front of these people well before the webinar is to take place? You want to have an email sign up so that you can do an email sequence, reminder to these people who have expressed interest. And there's a whole strategy behind that. You don't want to inundate them, but you want to remind them, and you want to be, frequent, but not too crazy about reminding them with emails.
Yeah, you don't want to scare them away by too many emails at once.
Right. And, broadcast to your contacts in your network, ask them to share it. You may have some businesses that you partner with, vendors that could share it to their clients, put it on their social media. I mean, this webinar, I'm assuming most businesses do their webinars for free at first as a draw.
Sure.
You're giving away free content to get people in. So if you can kind of promote it as it's a free resource and get people on board with being like partners, you could even have a sponsor if you wanted to go that far for promotion. Social media is huge. You can do paid ads. I feel like I'm just running down a laundry list here.
Sure.
But,
Like I said, we'll do a more in-depth promotional one, but those are some great ideas as far, and you could probably name another 10 more in the next couple of minutes.
Right, post it in groups, post it on your organic feed, your personal feed, your business page. What else did we do? I'm trying to backtrack to how we promoted ours.
We did a lot of word of mouth.
Yeah, we did networking events.
Yeah, that's huge. I almost forgot that one.
And don't forget our glorious promotional video.
Oh,
Oh,
gosh.
yes.
That took us longer than the podcast, creating
Well, yeah,
a 30-second promo video.
As much as you guys thought it took
Or the
long on your
webinar,
end, tried going through all those. I forget now. I think it was like 4 or 5 hours worth of promo video stuff that I had to shuffle through to get it down to like 3 minutes.
Here's some of the things because we put together a promotional video, and maybe we'll put a link in the show notes. Not the
It's still
video,
on a
maybe
YouTube
the
channel.
outtakes
Both of
actually.
them are still on a YouTube channel.
So we learned a ton
Oh,
from
yeah.
doing that promotional video. One is we probably could have gotten away without doing it to begin with, but for whatever reason we thought, we should do this. So we waded into the pool. First thing was,
Alicia's already laughing because she can think about what we went through.
the first thing I think we learned is don't use a teleprompter.
No, because we sounded like, and
I, yeah.
am not
Yeah.
reading
Well,
with enthusiasm.
not only it didn't sound good, it didn't look good because we
were
weren't looking into the camera. We were looking just off camera. And even when we put the teleprompter right underneath the camera,
Still looked off.
you could see the eyes shifting. And it didn't come off natural. So we scrapped the teleprompter. We actually memorized our lines, and it was much more natural. But then we had lighting issues. We had backdrop issues. There was all sorts
Hair
of
issues.
hair issues.
I don't know what you're talking about. My hair was perfect the whole entire time.
Yes, it did. It looked perfect. So, and then like you said, we had way too much
Hours in
footage
editing.
to go through. I mean, ultimately, I think it turned out okay, but
Did we need it?
we probably didn't need it, but we learned a ton from it, and I think we've taken a lot of that lessons in tech and brought them forward into the podcast.
Sure.
We were much more prepared to start the podcast. We were like, okay, we know what not to do now.
Yes, and we're sharing that valuable insight
I
with
think-
you.
I think that was a great learning experience, if nothing else, for us to be able to be ready to do a podcast. And are we still learning? Sure, absolutely. Every podcast
Right.
we learn something new. But it was invaluable as far as learning how to shoot promo videos, how to think about how to script things, while the podcast is not scripted, we have bullet points we go off of and things along that line.
Right.
But I have a feeling that if we hadn't done the webinar, we would have never thought, we would have had it really scripted out for every podcast, and it would have sounded very scripted.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the webinar. We did have a script.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was more formal and much more, because we had a certain time that we had to meet.
Yes.
So it's okay to have your script, but go through it rehearse it out loud.
Yeah, we did like 3 or 4 runs before we even went live.
Right. We did dry runs because you do know the material, but it also has to flow and it has to sound natural. So rehearse.
And I would also add to that, the invaluable thing for me, being the tech guy, the invaluable thing for me on that was I insisted that we did everything with the microphones. We could have done the practice run-throughs without recording anything, but it helped me the day of to be prepared for things that could come up by recording that over and over again. So if you're doing your sound yourself, if you're doing the tech yourself, I would definitely suggest during the run-through doing it as though you were doing it live.
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about the tech? So if somebody wants to do a webinar and they just want to, they're at entry level, they just kind of want to do the bare minimum tech-wise, what do you recommend?
Well, if we weren't going, or if we, obviously we didn't plan that out ahead of time, but if I were to do it all over again, I would say a simple USB microphone if it's one person, either a USB headset or a or even Bluetooth for that matter. If it's one person, that's probably more than adequate enough for a simple webinar. Now, if you're doing 3 or 4 people, that's going to be a little bit different because it's not as easy to get all 3 or 4 of those headphones and microphones all into one place, and that was what we were running up against. So we ended up having to go the route of a USB soundboard and running actual mics into the soundboard. What we found out was, and you guys can attest to this, was the first set of microphones we bought were pretty crappy microphones. And
Yeah, they were.
they get dropped once, and that was pretty much the end of them. But, so I would suggest, if you're just doing a one-time webinar, and it's just you or maybe one other person, USB microphones are more than adequate for what you want to do. If you're doing a multiple group type of webinar, invest into a little bit more, especially if you're going to be doing the webinar more than once.
Now, what about software?
Well, again, here's where where you have to kind of think about what you're doing. I can name probably 4 or 5 different programs that you could use to put on a webinar.
Now, we used Zoom, right?
We used yes, we did use Zoom. We ended up using Zoom for the webinar. I've since found a couple more programs that I probably, if I were to be redoing it again, I would do it a different piece of software. But Zoom's adequate if you're going to be doing under 100 people at the webinar, and if you're going to, if you have a decent internet connection. Let me back that up before we even go into the actual software.
Right, because if you're doing it live.
Yeah, you need to test wherever you're going to be doing that webinar live from, and make sure it's got a rock solid internet connection.
Because some people will do pre-recorded webinars.
Which is fine.
So it's different, but doing a live, you don't want to go off air.
No, last thing you want to do is be 5 minutes into the webinar, and then all of a sudden your listeners, they'll listen to dead air because they've lost you. So, having said that, Zoom's a great one. There's a software, and I'll put the notes in the show notes, but Zoom, I found a great piece of software that I still use to this day called OBS. It's a free piece of software. It's online broadcasting system, it's called. You can actually use that to go live to YouTube, which a lot more people are using YouTube now for webinars. You can also go live to Facebook with it.
Cool.
So now, what that gives you is, let me back up for a second. A lot of people are using Facebook Live nowadays. We use it on our page. Most of what we're using it for is just a quick hop on, kind of tell people about what's going on,
Right.
or something.
You could use it to put on a webinar.
You could use it to put on a webinar. Well,
So you can share your screen, Bill?
yeah.
Cool.
So the nice thing about that is, we build a deck for a webinar, like we just talked about.
Right.
You can actually use OBS to use that deck and put it right out to Facebook Live or right out to YouTube Live.
Cool.
So that's something that Zoom can't do for you. At least I don't think they have that technology
No,
yet.
you can share your screen and share the deck, but I don't know.
Can't go to Facebook Live or YouTube Live or anything like that.
yeah,
They may have changed it, or they may be in the process of changing it,
Trying
but
to
at this
think.
point, that brings up another great point is, what is the platform you want to be putting it out through? Do you want it on a Facebook Live? Do you want it on a YouTube Live?
Yeah. Well, do you want it live or do you want to pre-record it?
Yep.
Or do you want it private, like group, or do you want it open to
Yeah.
multiple people to
I mean, the
jump
advantage
in?
of doing it live, like what we did, is that you can have a Q&A session.
Sure.
You know, and so people, depending on what you use, like we use Zoom, so there was a chat feature where people could put their questions in.
You can do the same thing with YouTube now. They can actually do live chatting
Oh, okay.
as you go along. I'm not sure if Facebook's always done it, so.
Yeah, Facebook has a comment section.
The only thing I'm not sure about with the OBS software if you'd be able to see the chat directly through there.
Yeah.
You can see it with YouTube. You can't
Yeah.
necessarily.
So the advantage of live is you can be interactive.
Yes,
Your webinar
yes.
can be interactive. Advantage of pre-recorded is that, okay, you don't have the interactivity, but you can, if you screwed up the first time, you can record it a second time until you get it the way you want it
Sure,
to.
sure. So
Right.
it's a trade-off.
To me, if someone's doing it live, I'm more likely to tune in when it's live.
Yeah.
One, because I get to ask those questions, and two, I feel like if someone's taking their time to do it live, then it's a more valuable experience.
I've actually-
Does that make sense?
I've
Yeah,
actually,
that makes sense.
I've actually seen some webinars where they pre-recorded it, but acted as though it was live.
I hate that.
I hate that. You can usually tell within a few minutes of.
Yeah. Like, Sally is joining us from
Yeah.
Ohio. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Hey,
Okay,
Sally.
well, no, that's a
I
great
do
point.
that all the
That's a great point we haven't talked about is you need to be genuine when you're doing these
Right.
webinars.
Yeah.
People are going to sniff out a fake right away, especially if you're trying to sell them something.
Right.
We're talking about marketing here. Your marketing is sales.
Yeah.
And
Well, I would say good marketing rules apply in your webinar.
sure.
Yeah.
And if you're just trying to do it to sell the latest get rich quick scheme, people are going to read through that. They're going to
Yeah.
see through that.
So I have a question because we did this during our webinar and it's pretty common. But to get people to stay through the whole thing, obviously you want them to stay because your content is good. But how do you feel about saying something in the start? If you stay to the end, we have a
I think
special.
I don't see. I think doing a webinar again. I would still do that because
Yeah.
I think it has value.
It's like a reward for the loyal listeners and watchers.
It's that, and people are always in the back of their mind going, "Gee, I wonder if this is something really worthwhile at the end." So I'm going to hang out and listen because I really want to hear.
Right.
And hopefully, if your content of the webinar is strong enough, that's almost secondary what they're going to get at the end.
True.
And that brings up another point. So you've got your webinar, you've put it on. Have a call to action at the end. You have their attention for 30, 40 minutes. Give them something to do. Tell them what they're supposed to do at the end of the webinar. Are they supposed to go sign up for something? Is there something that they can download? What is it that you're giving them
Yes.
a chance to do? And we'll let Alicia talk a little bit about follow-up after the webinar. I mean, you can set up a email campaign to contact those people that have registered. So how would you go about doing that?
Before you talk about that, can we talk about? I'll have you talk about this, Alicia. The different avenues of pieces of software that you can use as an email follow-up.
Oh, yeah. So, like, different, like, MailChimp,
Yeah,
Constant
yeah.
Contact.
The reason I say that is because people
Oh,
may
yeah.
not know how to do that.
I mean, yeah, MailChimp, Constant Contact, Active Campaign. You can send emails from your CRM if you use something like Agile or a HubSpot. The email options are endless out there.
CRM?
Customer Relation Management tool.
Reason I'm asking.
Yep.
Yeah, is that right?
The lingo. Yeah, you're right.
So if you have an email program set up already, just go with that and filter your leads, your webinar registrations into that mail base, that database, segment them out. People who made the webinar should get a different email after the webinar versus those who signed up for the webinar and did not make it. And so going back to like the tools, if you use a tool like Zoom or OBS or Join Meeting or
Join.me? Is
Yeah,
that something?
something like there's so many, but if you should always record the webinar
Yes.
when you're doing it live. Even if you feel like it wasn't that great, you can at least learn from it. But then you can send it out to the people who watch the webinar.
Which is a nice thing about the OBS system I was telling you about. You can record the live stream as you're going, so that way, and that's what we did. We recorded it through Zoom. You could do it. We recorded it and then made it available. And matter of fact, it's still available on. Is it still available on the website? I don't
Yeah,
remember.
you
It's
can get
available
to
on
it.
our YouTube
I
channel.
know it's on the channel. I couldn't remember if we still had it up
Yeah.
on the website or not because it's getting a little old at this point.
It is,
but-
it is available on the website, but it's also, if you just go on the YouTube channel, it's sitting there too.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So-
That brings up a good point too. I think, depending on the industry you're in, think about how long you want to use this webinar as a marketing tool and how evergreen you can keep it, because we're in digital marketing and things and trends change in digital marketing. So the webinar we did in like January, probably some stuff will be irrelevant.
Obsolete.
Yeah, obsolete by now.
Well, I noticed like my portion of it, I had featured a website and kind of went through and talked about, they're doing this great, they're doing that great. Well, they've redesigned the website. So it doesn't look like that anymore. So yeah, stuff, like
Changes.
that changes.
And the other thing to keep in mind, and this is something that we didn't fully think about when we're doing the webinar is that call to action at the end, where or the special gift you're giving them at the end. That may become dated really quickly. Also, you need to think about that ahead of time. What are you giving as an offer? If it's a discounted product, are you willing to give that discounted product for the life of that webinar? If not, do you have something in place where you can edit that out afterwards? Or, so that's something else to think about in the course of the webinar that, most people don't think about. Oh, I'm going to give away this. Great. Are you okay with doing that for however long you keep that out there?
Yeah. So there's prep, there's the production of the webinar, all of the details that go into that, and then there's follow-up and marketing afterwards. So there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, they are wonderful marketing tools, and they do have, unlike, say, some shorter-term digital marketing, they do have a little bit of a shelf life.
Yeah.
You can probably get a year out of it if you
If you pick your topic accordingly. I mean, because if I was to do a webinar tomorrow about like Facebook's algorithm changes, that might not be good for that long. But if you pick something that's more general, then you can make it last for a while. So think about that in the beginning, because I think there is value to like short-term topics. If it's a hot topic at that point, just remember you're not going to be able to use it for a long time.
Yeah. So I guess that would be part of the very initial part where we're talking about, well, what is the topic?
Right. I think if
you got to take into account longevity. How long do you want that webinar to be out?
If it's short term, if it's something timely, maybe a Facebook Live suffices.
Right, because you do have to put a lot of work into it.
Right. Yeah. So it's a time and effort investment. So I think if you're going to do a traditional, we'll call it that, traditional webinar, have your content be something that you can get some mileage out of.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say a good rule of thumb, 6 months, a year?
I would say at least 6 months, because, I mean, I didn't tally up the number of hours that we all spent putting that webinar together, but it was a lot.
Right.
It was a lot.
It was more hours than I can count on my two hands.
It was a learning experience. So hopefully, by providing tips, we hope you can cut down on your...
Yeah, I was going to say, we got to be careful. We're going to scare people away from ever doing a webinar.
I think they're well worth the investment. And we just hit on the highlights today.
Sure.
And you will have some good resources in the show notes for this episode. But we may circle back around to this topic again and go a little bit more in depth in some of the things that we mentioned today.
For those of you who are in the Little Rhody marketing group, there's a little plug for it, I guess. Some of the Tech Tuesday stuff coming up is going to be showing you some of the gear we actually use. And this stuff works for podcasts as well as webinars. So it might be something to keep an eye out for and join the group. It's another reason to join the Little Rhody marketing group on Facebook. You get to see some of the stuff we use, and some of the stuff, I might even show some of the stuff that we got rid of because it wasn't so good. I don't know, should I out those manufacturers?
Is there such a thing as an anti-sponsor?
No, I think it's important that people realize that I watch a ton of unboxing videos. You guys know what those are.
Such a weird hobby.
I know.
I watch unboxing
No,
videos.
the reason I watch them is because this drives my wife absolutely crazy. If I'm going to make a purchase, usually I will research it till the end of time because I want to make sure I'm going to get something fairly good and that it's not going to crap out the minute I get it. The only caveat to that is when I really have to buy cheap because I can't afford anything other than that, but I will overly look at things. So I watch a lot of unboxing videos to make sure, hey, is this good or bad?
Yeah.
And I find the ones that they come back and say, these are horrible. Great. Now I don't have to go and reinvent that wheel,
Yeah. A lot of people do that now, read reviews to you can get sucked into Amazon reviews for hours if you want.
Some of them are quite entertaining.
Okay, I'm going to, the Haribo ones?
No, Haribo, they make a quality product, the gummy bears. But
Look at the diet gummy bears.
Oh, did they make the diet ones?
They made the diet ones that the people were talking about. You'll have to go.
Also read reviews on the Trump Christmas ornament on Amazon. Those were funny.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said,
there's some very entertaining
We'll put the
reviews.
links for the Haribo diet ones and just for people who want to have a laugh. But anyway,
This is not educational, purely
the show
entertainment.
notes are going to be longer than the podcast
that's okay.
episode.
That's okay. We got to give stuff.
Yeah,
right?
we can make this into an outline that people could download in the future if we have time to put that together, like your webinar outline, strategy outline or something.
I could see this at some point in time becoming a class of some sort where we could, walk people through, because there's so much we haven't hit on today.
Yeah, and I know what we're going to call it already. What not to do when putting together a webinar.
I think that's not
Because we
quite
got a ton of content for that.
Yeah, but the thing is because wouldn't we want people to learn from our mistakes?
Yeah, absolutely,
I
yeah.
mean, the reality is, yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. Did we pull it off? Yeah, I think we did. I think
Yeah.
we did a pretty good job of
Yeah.
pulling it off. But the reality is, we made a ton of mistakes along the way, you know. And I can tell you that even with just the promo video alone, there were a bunch of stuff that if I had to do it over again, I would do it totally different.
Yeah.
So-
I think overall our product and our webinar came out successful.
I
We
think
had
so, yeah.
great attendance, amount of attendees, and good questions. And I really thought the product, I guess is product the right word, but the
Yeah.
overall like webinar recording came out pretty quality, pretty good.
And I think if it didn't, we wouldn't be doing this right now, what we're doing. If it wasn't something that we saw that was doable, even for a bunch of novices like us who knew nothing about the tech end of it, we pulled it off. And we're doing a podcast that's coming out now every week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anybody can do it. If we can do it, anybody can do it.
There's our tagline right there. If we can do it,
You can do it.
anybody can do it.
No,
Right.
I mean, there's truth to that. But why not contact us? We can show you how to do it the right way.
Yeah, I was just going
Right.
to say, if I was left to my own devices to put on a webinar, I'd be calling Bill still, so.
You know,
I think this is probably a good place to wrap this one up.
it would be, I guess. So, as we always say, our shameless plug at the end. If you like what you hear, please go to our website, marketingessentialsteam.com.
And subscribe
And
to the podcast.
And subscribe to the podcast, which is now available through Apple Podcasts. I used to call it iTunes. Apparently, it's Apple Podcasts now.
I think it's kind of the same thing.
It's the same thing,
but
yeah,
I
pretty
mean,
much.
I've noticed now that they've been branding it as Apple Podcasts rather than iTunes. But
Either-
it's the same.
Yeah, either way, you look up Marketing Essentials.
Tomato.
Yeah, you'll find it on there, Marketing Essentials. You'll be able to listen to all of our previous podcasts and also get notified when something new is breaking. Same thing with our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has the same capabilities. You can like and subscribe to the channel.
Yep.
And you will get a notification as soon as the next podcast breaks.
And if you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur or a marketer, and you've been looking for a place on Facebook to get some helpful tips and some support, you can go to Little Rhody Marketing Support Group on Facebook and ask to be part of that.
And if you're nice to Alicia, she'll let you in.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, she will. She's our bouncer.
She is.
She's the
She's tough to get by.
yeah. Those velvet ropes, those are tough to get past. But it's a great place to hang out.
Yes.
Be able to ask questions, see what some other people are doing to market their businesses, and just get some marketing help and support.
Yeah, definitely. We welcome you.
And the other side bonus to that is you get to talk about your own business a little bit too.
Right.
Which I've seen some connections already starting to happen there on the page where, you know, oh, I need this person or I need that person. Let me reach out to them through there.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
It is. It is.
So,
So I guess that's all for this week. You know what we have not done is mention our unofficial sponsor, I guess you would call it.
We've been recording a lot of these podcasts now from Rooms and Works, which is a co-working space in Providence. And it's a great space if you're looking to get out of your house
Yes.
and work in a professional atmosphere, either at an open desk or in a semi-private office. I highly recommend checking them out. You can find them at roomsandworks.com on the web.
Now, can they schedule an appointment to do a tour through there?
yeah.
Or do they just come down and say hi? Or
No, if you call and ask for Sarah, who's the property manager here, she will be happy to give you a tour of the space and tell you anything you need to know.
And she's been great about giving us the opportunity to be able to record here, so
Yes, yeah.
can't thank him enough. Well, with that said, I guess it's time. I almost used the Mickey Mouse theme. Now it's time to say no. I'm going to get singing in yet. Take us out of here, Justin.
Say goodbye to our podcast family.
Say goodnight, Gracie. Well, I guess it's better. Let's see how many different things we can throw in. Should we do the little magic mirror too?
Yeah.
For those of you who remember that?
Romper Room, yeah, I remember that.
Alicia's like,
Never,
what?
ever called my name, ever. Okay? I've had to go a lot of therapy for that.
They call my name almost every week. I
Yeah?
loved it. Yeah.
Can't imagine. I mean,
He's like, and I see Billy.
there you are.
She's talking to me.
All right. I think we need to wrap this up.
I'm just going to keep going now. All right, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
bye.